So as we approach the holidays, I think this is a really important topic because I think that you might we tend to not even realize that we might be afraid of being lonely. And I just want to say to not be afraid to be lonely. Now, to put this in context, I've been now single for 3 years, and I never thought that it would be this long, or I would, be single this long. I spent most of my life between the ages of, even under 10, I guess, or, at least between the ages of 13 and 26, basically being in relationships, looking for relationships, prioritizing, intimate connections above other things, and so on. But in 2013, I went through a breakup. This it wasn't even my last breakup, but my breakup before that. And I was basically overcome with loneliness. I had been living with the person. Spent all my time. We spent all our time together. And it was even to the point where I was like, I realized I hadn't even like slept in a bed alone for like over a year. So by the time she moved out of our apartment, it was super super intense for me and really lonely. She went into another relationship right away, and I kind of stayed single for a short period of time. Then I got into another relationship, and now I've been single for 3 years. Just to share the story. Anyway, so at that time in my life, I was really wondering what this lonely feeling was, and I had this distinct memory of being in my bed and being by myself, which again is I think a important terminology. It's not like you're alone, you're just by yourself. So I was by myself, and I was just I felt terrible. I can't even put into words how it felt. It was a while ago, so it's hard to exactly remember, but I remember having a thought that's when something like this: I never want to feel like this again. And what can I do to protect myself so that, I don't? And what things do I need to understand, and what skills do I need to develop in order to take preventative action, but also know how to handle things when life does happen? Because life inevitably happens. You're going to feel lonely. It's part of it, right? So I started doing some work on what exactly is loneliness, because one thing we can all agree is that loneliness is not, and we'll say what it is not first. Loneliness is not the circumstance or the environment or anything like that. And we know this because we know that we can feel lonely in many different states and situations, I mean. So what does then that mean in terms of what loneliness actually is and how it works? So in my own kind of discoveries of myself and, listening and watching other people, loneliness is really a state of mind. It's a state where we are unhappy with what's currently going on in our environment in that moment. So a few examples: we know that we can feel lonely in relationships while we're coupled, and we can feel lonely when we're single. We can feel lonely when we are surrounded by friends and family, and we can feel lonely when we're just happen to be by ourselves. And so again, it's that importance to recognize that it's more about the mental state and the story that you're telling yourself in that moment. So here's an example. I'm at home watching TV. I start feeling lonely. Again, I said, I've been single for a number of years, so that happens, right? You're like, especially when you did put so much weight and stock in relationships before that. So you feel lonely, or I'm feeling lonely, and I just start, I start to remind myself and listen to the thoughts in my head. Listen to the thoughts and the stories that you're telling yourself when you're feeling lonely, or by yourself. All these things of nobody loves me. I put that in quotes because obviously, at least when I reflect on my own life, I know that that's not true. Maybe the love that I'm searching for in that moment doesn't look exactly as I want it to look, which is causing the suffering, that dissonance between how we think a situation should be and what's actually happening. But there are plenty of times when I'm by myself watching TV or doing something else, and I feel not lonely at all. I actually feel amazing. I'm having the best time. I'm totally enjoying myself. I'm watching exactly what I want to watch, and I don't feel lonely at all. And then there's times when I'm doing the exact same thing, but I feel lonely. So the only difference is the thoughts in my head. Sometimes I'm telling myself, this is perfect, it's the best, I'm totally having a good time, and I don't need anything else, and I feel totally fulfilled. But when I feel lonely, I'm not telling myself those things. In fact, I'm having thoughts, images in my mind that are telling me that I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, that there should be something else happening, that I should have a partner with me, you know, that's making me feel good, or I should be spending time with this person or that person, or or even worse, when it starts to really spiral and get lonely, you're telling yourself stories about the future. That not only are you feeling lonely in the moment, you're also going to feel lonely in an hour, in 2 hours, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and on and on and on, right? So it's really important that we listen to those thoughts first and foremost and remind ourselves that it's a state of mind. And I'll give you one other example. I was even at a holiday party and I was having the best time, and I was around all these people that like love and care about me and all of these friends, and I was still having lonely thoughts. I was still having thoughts that were like, ugh, like, you know, I don't even know. It's like even embarrassing to like say, but you're just kind of like, nobody loves me, and all those things that you hear in your head that aren't true, that also a lot of the time that alcohol make you feel inside. It's giving you thoughts that A, you don't have to believe and aren't even true, and B, it's just kind of telling yourself this constant barrage of thoughts that are not meant to make you feel good. They're meant to make you feel bad. Anyway, so it's really important that we combat those. But the reason why I say don't be afraid to be lonely is because I think I spent a lot of my time in life afraid of the feeling of loneliness and what that would look like and what that means. A, that it's, again, going to be a constant, that as soon as you feel it, you'll never be able to let it go, which is a story, again, that we tell ourselves about how that looks. But also, I think that we shouldn't be afraid to be lonely, because it's actually in the loneliness that's given me the most strength over the last few years. And so when I decided that I was going to, especially in my last breakup and just my everything that's happened in the past, when I decided that I was going to kind of change my experience of life, that I was going to start telling myself new stories about what it means to be me and about how I operate and what I do and the things that matter to me, I realized that loneliness is a huge factor there. That one, to not be avoided, one to actually lean into, one to actually create time and space out for while you're walking around and while you're doing stuff, and taking time by yourself to feel those feelings and to not mask them and to not hide them and to not even equate the loneliness with a negative. Not even equate it as like, oh, I'm feeling like alone right now. And what I mean by alone, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that I mean that feeling that, again, something's wrong, that like you should be having a different life, that you're not cared for, you're not loved, you're not important, you're not, your existence is merely just, you don't matter to people, and all those things that obviously we tell ourselves from when we're kids. And so when I say don't be afraid, I mean lean into it, especially during the holidays when this time comes up. There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of, anticipation for how you should feel and be. And again, that's a perfect bed for loneliness to develop. New Year's is coming. That's a time when obviously a ton of people feel lonely, and not because they're not out partying and doing stuff, but because they have one idea in their head of how it should go and it doesn't end up going that way. So instead of just listening to yourself and being in those feelings and just, saying, hey, I feel, I'm feeling like not really loved right now, and not really, not really any of those things that could come up. And to remind ourselves that inside, it's us that can fix that. It's us that has the power to talk back to ourselves in those environments, and to remind ourselves that it's totally okay to feel that way, and it's totally okay to have moments where there's dissonance there. But what's very important is that we don't let it spiral out of control, that we don't keep telling ourselves things that just add to it, and that can be sometimes something that we all do, right? Is like, we'll just feel a thought, we'll think it, and then it'll just keep going and going and going and going, and we'll say, well, and it's because of this thing that you don't have that, or it's because of that thing. Like, how many times in my head I tell myself that, like, that, like, I being totally honest here, like, I tell myself that, like, because I'm trans, I don't deserve any love from anybody, which sounds nuts, right? But it's like, and it doesn't necessarily come in exactly in that thought, but just that idea that it's like, you know, you look at your past and you're like, well, this didn't work out for me and that didn't work out for me. And it's kind of like, maybe it's because of these things. But here's the thing. I know that that's not true because I have a ton of love in my life and a lot of incredible people. And I also know it's not true because I don't know, I this is the only life I could have lived, and this is what it is, right? And so if that is true, if this is the only life I could have lived, and if this is exactly who I'm supposed to be, which I do truly believe, then all good if people don't like it, and all good if it's like people are like, oh, you're trans and you suck, right? Because I know that that's not true, right? So anyway, just wanting to basically say that loneliness is a very, very, very important part of self-growth. It's a very important part of self-development. It's an important part of breaking codependence. It's an important part of being independent. It's an important part of being successful, because at the end of the day, you are not alone. You're not. You know, there's millions, I think billions of people on the planet, and we're all kind of here, you know, dealing with similar states of mind, which by nature means you're not alone. Also, what we know about science and physics, you know, you're not alone. And also, you are, how am I trying to say this? Anytime you feel that way and you hear that thought and you think that you're the only one going through something, it's important that you remember that you're not. And that includes your loneliness. That includes feelings of isolation. And if we stop thinking so much internally and we start thinking more collectively, I think that will help ease everyone's understanding of what that looks like. And so just to want to implore on the holidays to find time to be by yourself. It's okay if you feel lonely. It's okay if you feel so lonely that you like cry on the floor. Like, honestly, I think that's an important part of healing. So don't be afraid of it. In fact, dive right into it. Dive so into it that you'll realize you're 10 times stronger than you ever thought. And that's it.